Good day, good night, and welcome. Welcome back to Animation Station, your number one stop station for anything and everything animation. Welcome to our first theme month of this month of July. It'll probably be July by the time I upload this. Welcome to DC Lie. This is half of a month really, where I'm going to be reviewing a bunch of the animated DC movies, such as this one right here. Now I'm starting early because plans ended up getting screwed up. I couldn't review Teenage Kraken, and the DreamWorks tier list also got delayed. So to help make up for that, I have this review for you right here to kick off the month one day earlier than expected. This is a movie I remember watching once as a kid, but I couldn't really remember a whole lot about it. But I remembered Dracula, I remembered Vampire Joker, and I remembered this very different version of Batman. Outside of that, I didn't remember the story, I didn't remember the characters, I didn't remember who was involved, I didn't remember the voice actors, none of that. I remember thinking this movie was okay when I was a kid. Keep in mind, this was back before I was really into analyzing movies and media, so but watching it now, especially as someone who is a huge fan of both Batman and Dracula, this is a great movie. We are already starting off with a phenomenal movie. Now, this time around, I'm going to try to be a bit more analytical with this review, because these are movies that have mostly been out for decades, because most of these came out in the 2000s. 2000s to the early 2010s. So, for that reason, I think I'm okay to get into minor spoilers. I'll talk about maybe one or two moments that are technically spoilers that I just want to discuss. But the first thing I'm going to do before I even start any of that with these reviews is that I'm going to talk about the voice cast, because the voice cast is what really makes these movies come alive. Yes, the animation is good, and yes, the story writing is very good, but it's all going to come down to the voice actors. If your voice acting isn't good, you can have the most amazing writing and story in the world, but people won't be interested. So how to do? Let's take a look. First up, we have our Bruce Wayne / Batman of this movie and this particular show, Reno Romano. He's no Kevin Conroy, absolutely not. But what he is that he's a very good character. Well, he's a very good voice for Batman. Yes, his Batman voice isn't the most intimidating in the world. It doesn't really change much from his normal Bruce Wayne voice, but I would also argue that makes it more unique. More unique and interesting, at least in my personal opinion. And he is a very good Bruce Wayne. This one's a bit more of a suave bachelor rather than, the Batman we're all used to. Yeah, he's pretty faithful to the comic character, with just a little bit of difference. So, Reno Romano, good job. You did a good job. Then we have Tara Strong, or Tara Strong, however you want to pronounce it, voicing Vicky Vale. Now, most of us know her better for voicing Harley Quinn, but in this movie, she does good enough. Vicky Vale is very much a background character in this, and while she does play decently into Bruce Wayne and his dilemma and his character throughout, outside of that, she doesn't really do a whole lot. But Tara does a good job because she's Tara Strong. She can make literally anything sound good. Then we have Kevin Michael Richardson as Joker. One of the most weird Jokers I've ever seen. This one is an agile runner. He is definitely a few screws loose in the head, but he's a bit more feral and a bit more, how do I put this, wild and wacky than other Jokers, and that's saying a lot, because there's a lot of wild, wacky Jokers in this pantheon, but he's pretty cool. I think he has a very unique and interesting design, even though the red eyes is a bit odd. But Kevin Michael Richardson, being the great voice actor that he is, really makes his character work, and especially when he gets to play a vampire version later, yeah, he knocks it out of the friggin' park. Then there's Jeff Bennett, he does some additional voices, same with Neil Ross. And then we come to Alistair Duncan as Alfred. He's pretty good. He's pretty much what you would want from someone voicing Alfred. Can't really say much more than that. And then there's Richard Green, James C., and then we have Tom Kenny as the Penguin. And this is arguably one of Tom's best roles since, well, SpongeBob, because he does an amazing job voicing Penguin here. He's snively, he's very conniving, and, you know, the Penguin you're used to from the comics, with a little bit of a comic-y cartoon edge. But Tom's done such an amazing job voicing Penguin that he's actually gotten to voice the character in a bunch of other Batman/DC animated films. Like heck, even later this month when we get to the second half of this month, what I'm going to call the Cowabunga Cavalcade, when we take a look at Ninja Turtles, he gets to come back to voice Penguin for Batman vs. TMNT. So, yeah, that's going to be really cool. And he's Tom Kenny. He's an amazing voice actor. We all know he's an amazing voice actor. Nothing more to say. And then we have Peter Stormare as Dracula, or Alucard. Yeah, this is one that's actually really faithful to the Dracula lore. I'll get into that later. But I've heard the name, but I don't really know a whole lot about him. Actually, I'm going to take a minute to look at his IMDb page for a second. See if I recognize him from anything. Yeah, I don't recognize this guy. Sorry. I've heard the name. I know he's a legendary actor, but I don't know much about him. What I can tell you is that he absolutely knocks it out of the park as Dracula/Dr. Alucard. He does an amazing job in this movie sounding, well, just evil and rotten to the core, like you'd expect Dracula to be. Yes, he's a bit of a flat, generic villain voice, but, I mean, it's Dracula. And since this is still technically a kid's movie, because The Batman was watched by a lot of kids, from what I believe, they can't really go like super scary with it. So you know what, he does a great job as Dracula/Dr. Alucard for what he needs to do for what the movie requires. Is it the most memorable, amazing Dracula in the world? Probably not. He's no Bela Lugosi, but he's still pretty good. Like, it's not amazing, no, but it's still pretty good. And then, yeah, that's all that. Now for the actual story. It's pretty good. Penguin ends up accidentally awakening Dracula from his sleep when he accidentally bleeds on his ashes. Yeah, just a heads up. There is some blood and brutality, but it's not like horror movie level. It's just to stay true to the Dracula lore, which is one thing I really gotta give this movie credit for before I go any further in detail with the story. This movie is so faithful and respectful to Dracula's actual lore, from the way that he has a giant cross over his coffin made out of chains, or the way that the only way to bring him back is to bleed onto his ashes, almost like a Hammer horror film. And of course, like I said earlier, Alucard, his alias, which, if you guys don't know, was from way back in Son of Dracula, where it was realized that Alucard is Dracula spelled backwards. And then that later became its own separate character in Castlevania. So, yeah, it's very faithful to the Dracula lore, and of course he has a hatred for garlic, a lust for blood, and wanting to revive his dead bride. That's the simplest way I can put it without getting too dark or in detail, because he does some pretty nasty, gruesome stuff in this movie. Not really visually, but more just conceptually. Like, Minor spoiler here. His whole goal in this movie is to use the life essence from another person to resurrect his dead wife, who will then feast on the dead body and regain her power, and then probably feast on anyone else in her nearby vicinity. And apparently, according to the actual movie itself, she has more of a bloodlust than even Dracula. Like, that is freaky. Like, it is some freaky deaky stuff. And if you're a horror fan, and if you especially know your Dracula lore, you're going to really enjoy this one. Just on a story level. And the story's pretty good. I like the way that Dracula messes with Batman's head, and how he keeps getting conflicted about what to do because he's trying to be a good boyfriend to Vicky while also trying to fight back Dracula and save Gotham, you know. The classic double life scenario of any comic book superhero. Not to mention, this one is very dark and gothic in its atmosphere and its animation design. Like, most of this movie is spent in a cemetery. Well, okay, not most of it, but a good chunk of the movie is spent in a cemetery because that is Dracula's hideout. And it's some pretty gothic stuff, but it fits Batman, so it's cool. I also wanted to give a little shout out here. Sorry, this review's really scatterbrained. I know there's just so much I have to talk about with this movie. There's a scene in this movie where Bruce Wayne has a nightmare, and he sees Batman in his window. And then this Batman grows fangs and attacks him right before he wakes up. That, to my recollection, is a direct reference to the Batman vampire comic that this is taking a little bit of inspiration from, called Batman Red Rain. And that is one of the coolest horror comics, like, ever. Like, you think Dracula's gruesome in here? You have no idea how vicious and evil vampire Batman is in Red Rain. Like, it is some stuff that's going to make your blood churn when you see what he does to some of the Arkham inmates in that comic book. I'm not going to say any more because this is still somewhat a family-friendly channel, but yeah, 18 plus people, go check out that comic. It's amazing. It's gruesome. You're going to love it. So anyway, getting back on track. Like I said, I like the way that Dracula messes with Batman's head. Like, he tries to manipulate him, and he pretty much has the most iron will of any person. Well, of any being. Because he manipulates Batman not once, but twice to do something against his will. First time, he makes him walk outside so he has a little bit of time for Vicky, who he's trying to coerce into becoming his bride, which of course is a front to feed to his wife. You know the whole deal. You know the whole deal if you've already seen this movie, and if you haven't, highly recommended. Just saying that right now. And then the second time, when Batman is about to shoot him with a crossbow during their final battle. Final battle is awesome, by the way. He stops him just by looking at him, and he manages to make Batman shoot the antidote dart into the ground because his will is strong and no one's going to top it. That's pretty much how he says it. And it's really very, very much a cat and mouse game between these two, and it works really well. I especially really like the little added detail of Gotham thinking that Batman's behind the disappearances because, well, they keep seeing bats. Or something of that nature. It's a little bit hard to explain. Okay, I think I said enough about the story and the characters. Let's move on to the animation. It's very much direct-to-DVD animation. It's not great. There are more than a few spots where it does show its budget. Like, there's one scene in the Batcave where Batman lets off some kind of like garlic smoke bomb, and then it pans up to Alfred. Alfred's staying there, and then literally the next frame, without him even moving, the smoke suddenly appears. Almost like one of those crappy transitions in a low-effort YouTube video. You guys know what I mean. It has some moments like that. Outside of that, even for low budget, it's pretty good animation, especially when it gets to the actual Dracula stuff and the vampire stuff. Like, it gets really good. I especially love some of the really dark imagery they're able to get away with, like the way we see the vampires attack people. There's actual more instances of blood than I was expecting, even though, again, it is still limited because this is still technically a family-friendly movie, which is this movie's biggest problem, and I'll get to that later. And especially Dracula's death at the hands of Batman. It is one of the most BA, OP, most underrated, incredible Batman scenes you will see in any of these movies. It is such a cool scene. I especially really like the part where he lures Dracula out. He uses this solar thing, and Dracula finds out he's Bruce Wayne. He's like, yeah, and I'm Batman. And then he lifts up his cape, and all you see against the shadow of the wall of the sunlight, the only thing keeping Dracula temporarily from disintegrating into dust, is just this big image of Batman with his cape sprawled out and his hands looking like claws. In that one instance, you see true fear in Dracula's eyes. And it's freaking awesome. And like I said, gruesome villain death. Staying true to any good Dracula movie, there is a very gruesome Dracula death in this movie. In fact, it's so gruesome and so freaking cool, I don't want to spoil it. But I'll just say this. Do you guys remember that scene in Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island where as soon as the zombies are freed from, their torment, once the cat creatures are destroyed, we see their skin literally just peel off their bones? Yeah, imagine something like that. But also with the added bonus of Batman punching his freaking head off. Like, for a family-friendly movie, this got away with a lot of dark stuff. And being someone that loves that kind of dark stuff, like, it absolutely works for me. So, yeah, awesome scene. So, alright, let me get more to the generalization now that I'm done with the mostly in-depth stuff. The writing's really good, the characters are really good, the animation, while a bit low budget, still really good. The pacing's pretty good, it's less than an hour and a half, so it moves at a brisk, fast pace. It has a bunch of different twists and turns that you're not going to expect, even if you are a avid, knowledgeable person of Dracula lore, or Batman lore. And the final act is awesome. It makes the whole movie worth it just for that part alone. That whole part alone. Okay, so I've rambled on for about 18 minutes about everything this movie does right. What doesn't it do right? What are the things that kind of feel like it could have improved? Well, for one, like I said, the animation sometimes does show its budget, and it is a bit jarring. Like when you have a frame that literally looks like this, and then the same thing, but with some kind of filter on top of it. Like, you guys know what I mean? It's a bit hard to explain, but if you're an animation knowledgeable historian person, yes, that's a term, we're just gonna roll with it, then, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. There's some very questionable animation in this movie. But when it's really good, it's really good. And then, another big problem is Penguin himself. He's good in the first half of the movie when we actually see how he stumbles into Dracula's crypt. But after that, he kind of just becomes a background character, and they try to make him matter in the final act by chasing Vicky around after Batman frees her from Dracula. But after that, he barely does anything. And that is a huge shame. And the other part is Joker. And this is one other minor spoiler I'm going to give. There's one scene early in the movie when Batman is chasing Joker when he escapes out of Arkham, while Penguin uses it as a distraction to go to the crypt to look for what he thinks is money, but instead is actually Dracula. Joker and Batman have a fight. It's a pretty good fight, and Batman's about to save him as he's hanging off a ledge and there's water underneath him. But some rain gets on his little buzzer, cluing in Batman that he's going to, buzz him and drag him to the water if he tries. So he pulls his hand away, and Joker falls thinking everything's okay, and then he has that, that you done screwed up moment when he looks at his hand, sees that it's still electrifying, and there's water underneath him. Water and lightning don't go together. And for a while there, it looks like Joker is legit dead. Like, legit dead. And it's shocking. No pun intended, but it's legit shocking to see him go that early. But then you realize that he didn't die, and he ends up chasing Penguin down to Dracula's crypt. And then Dracula pulls him into the coffin and feeds on him. That's another part where we see genuine fear in a villain's eyes. And when that happens, you know that, something gruesome about to happen. So Dracula feeds on him, turns him into one of his minions, and he goes raiding at a blood bank. And then Batman, after having felt some guilt for letting Joker die, because, he doesn't know that Joker is still alive yet. He goes to this blood bank later on as Batman, and he realizes that Joker is alive but a vampire, and they have a fight scene. And it's very much cat and mouse. Like, Joker's crawling along the walls and taking all the blood and really outmatching Batman now that he has supernatural strength and speed. Like, it is some freaky stuff. And Vampire Joker, he is one scary SOB. Like, he frightened me a lot as a kid. He's the one part of this movie that I remembered from when I watched it the first time as a kid. It's freaky. It is so freaky, but it's so cool at the same time. I don't mind it. So, yeah, that's a cool scene. But after that, then he kind of just gets put in the background just like Penguin, and then Batman cures him later, and yeah. Then he just leaves the movie. Out of nowhere, just leaves the movie. Real shame. I wanted to see, like, him and Batman team up to hunt down Dracula, but whatever. I guess Joker got a Joker, right? And this movie's biggest problem, it can't fully lean into the Dracula lore or the actual potential of its concept, which has actually been fully realized up to this point in the comic books that are very similar to this. Again, Batman Red Rain. Because it's a family-friendly movie, they can't go all the way with its concept. Yes, we see scenes of actual blood, which is pretty shocking for a movie like this. But we don't see, like, heads rip off. We don't see Dracula shredding people apart or anything like that. And most of the time when there is blood drinking, it's off-screen. That's a huge bummer. But that might be to make up for the fact that the actual vampire designs, or the lost ones as they're called in the movie, are pretty freaky. Like, they're not as freaky as the Zombie Island zombies, but they're freaky. And like I said, Dracula's death. It's that kind of gruesomeness that you love to see in a Dracula movie. I'm not going to say anything more about it, just know it's awesome. So, I've talked about the pros, I've talked about the cons, I've talked about a decent bit of spoilers, and my overall thoughts on some of the other aspects of the movie. Let's get to the final verdict. This is a really good movie, but it's definitely a lot better if you're a horror fan, and especially if you're someone that's really into Dracula. Like, if you like Dracula and you like Batman, this is like the perfect movie for you. But if you don't like Batman and you just want to see Dracula, then it's not really going to work for you, because they can't go all the way with the actual Dracula lore or the actual brutality they could do with this concept, because it's still a family-oriented movie that's direct-to-DVD, and it's a spin-off of a cartoon show aimed so because of that, they can't go all the way with the concept, but what they were able to do with it was still pretty impressive. So, yeah, that's the movie's biggest problem. It's held back because it has to be a kid's movie, but outside of that, it is one of the most underrated, underappreciated Batman films I've seen in quite some time. It's dark, it's gothic, it's scary, it's funny sometimes, and it's suspenseful, action-packed, and a lot of fun all throughout. I really enjoy this one, and especially as someone that loves both of these franchises, this was a really cool crossover. Sure, the animation could have been better. Yes, I wish it wasn't PG, and yes, I wish that they got to really fully embrace that Dracula lore, but what they were able to do here was still great. I loved the little Easter eggs. I loved his back and forth with Batman, and the final battle was awesome. He gets a gruesome villain death, and it's just a great film. It's a great film if you're a horror fan, and then it's a good one-and-done movie if you're not. So I'm going to give it 2 final verdicts, but I'm only going to show my final verdict on the bottom of the screen. So if you are a casual viewer that's just a fan of Batman, not really into Dracula or anything like that, and you're watching this just as a Batman movie, it'd probably be around a 7 out of 10, because it's still really good as a Batman movie, but it definitely is a lot better because of the Dracula stuff. But if you are a fan of both franchises, and specifically this era of the Caped Crusader, not to mention being a huge fan of Dracula, and while also being knowledgeable of all the lore and catching all the little Easter eggs thrown in there, you are going to have a blast with this movie. It is a great, dark, gothic movie that is perfect for Halloween. Watch it right back to back with Zombie Island. Not as great as that movie, but it's still a great movie. So, here's how I see it. My final verdict for just the Batman fans and people that don't really even know about this particular installment of this franchise, it's a 7. But if you're someone like me who is a fan of this iteration of the Caped Crusader and the Caped Crusader in general, while also being a massive fan of dark stuff in kids' movies and the Dracula lore, this is going to raise it up to a solid, strong 8 out of 10 for the final verdict. This is a great watch. I had a great time, and that nearly hour and a half runtime flew right by. It is a fun, fantastic, great Batman film. And if you're a Batman fan, absolutely check it out. If you're a Dracula fan, check it out. If you're a fan of both, absolutely check it out. It's one underrated gem that's sadly been buried with time, but trust me when I say, it's a gem that's worth the search. Definitely check it out if you haven't. Highly recommended. And a great watch that I have definitely added to my itinerary to watch every Halloween now, right next to Scooby-Doo and Zombie Island. Dark, gruesome, gothic, and lots of fun. What more could you want from Batman vs. Dracula? Well, that's this review. Thank you guys so much for watching. I know this review is way longer than usual, but I had a lot to say about this movie, and I really want to be more in-depth with these DC animated reviews, because I really want to show you guys why these movies work, and the live-action ones, specifically the DCEU that's now thankfully dead, didn't work. So, I'm going to go pretty in-depth with these. These are going to be longer reviews, but I hope you don't mind that, and I hope you guys still enjoy the video regardless. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join the Stat Squad today. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of these uploads. And stay tuned, because we have a lot more DC movies to go. But I'm going to tell you right now, no Flashpoint Paradox, because I'm going in pretty much release order, while also throwing in a few extra Batman films. Because I'm a huge Batman fanatic, that's what I do. So, yeah. Thank you guys so much for watching, and anything else I really left to say? Not really. Thank you guys for watching. I'm Josh Small of Animation Station. Remember to #1 statistician for anything and everything animation. I'll see you guys tomorrow when we take a look at another Caped Crusaders animated outing with Superman Doomsday.